Okay,
Yeah.
you're on business. All right, thank you.
Sorry for
All
the
right.
inconvenience.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thanks for fixing it, Dakota.
terribly sorry for that delay. And where we're going to pick up is, was there anyone online that wished to comment this evening on a non-agenda item? And without seeing any, we will move right into our next item, which is climate-friendly, equitable communities presentation with Evan Manville.
Yes, good evening, folks. Thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for the service to the city. I know you spend a lot of time as volunteers doing this. So my name is Evan Manville. I'm with the Department of Land Conservation Development. We're the state land use planning agency. As you all know, some of the few wonks who know what DLCD is, but given your role, I'm here to talk about Oregon's parking reforms and kind of the choices in front of you as part of our climate friendly and equitable communities program. So before I'm briefly going to talk about why the parking reforms were adopted by our commission and why the department's supporting them, and then kind of outline the choices in front of you and take your questions so you can choose a reform path that works best for Troutdale. So one of the things that happens in the parking reform conversation is there's often an immediate fear that if the government doesn't mandate a bunch of parking, that parking won't be provided. And there's really very little evidence of that. You can see these examples here that some developers in downtown Eugene who didn't have to provide any provided 700 stalls of parking garages, the most expensive form of parking. In Los Angeles, when builders didn't have to build stuff, they built over a parking space per unit. You can see a developer in Corvallis on the edge of town for student housing said, well, we think the market requires 2.7 spaces per unit, so we're going to build more than required. And there's an example from Cornelius of a single family house that is required to provide one off-street parking space. And it looks like about 4 on that apron, including a couple in the garage, and then there's some on street as well. So generally, we think that the market figures this out, even in absence of government regulations. So parking, why we made this a part of our climate-friendly equitable communities program is because parking is really expensive in a lot of ways. And there's an opportunity cost. When we have a housing crisis in the state, we're housing cars a lot better than we are housing people in some ways. It's a very space-intensive use to store a car off-street. It's also a big expense to businesses. It's often, on average, a majority of the land use in commercial development is off-street parking, much bigger than the building itself or landscaping or other amenities. And it's a big use of the city's land. Both off-street and on-street parking just consumes, maybe 10% of the city is for car storage, higher in some cities. Now, that's particularly true in most downtowns. You can see all the land in red here, Corvallis on the top, Klamath Falls on the bottom, is off-street parking. So kind of the most valuable land in the community is often being used for off-street parking. And so what we tend to say is there's usually enough parking. And the smart thing to do is to figure out how to manage what you have rather than require a bunch more with each new development. So parking, it's really hard to put one specific cost on parking, but it's in the low thousands to the hundreds of thousands of dollars per space. And there's also an opportunity cost there. When you're using that parking, that's land for parking, it's not being used for housing or businesses or open space or other things. So it's a very large expense. And as the state is looking to figure out how to make housing more affordable to build and meet Governor Kotek's housing goals, parking tends to be 10 to 20% of total housing cost. So you can imagine 1 out of every $6 in your rent is going to house your car on average. And a lot of people don't have cars. About 1 in 6 Oregon renters don't actually own any cars. Renter households doesn't own any cars. So they're often paying a lot of rent for something they don't use. So it really is kind of this poor choice when you start to increase parking requirements, you're seeing less housing build. Similarly, here's a case study from Eugene that said, hey, we've got this corner lot, current code, which requires 1 space for off-street. We can only fit 2 units on, but if we can just build 3 off-street spaces for 4 units, we can actually build 2 more housing units. And just one of those cars has to park on street, or a renter doesn't own a car. So we've seen a lot of momentum nationally supporting parking reform from business leaders and from housing leaders and that sort of thing. Really just a broad societal realization that our parking approach of the past has been really expensive. Again, in affordable housing, it just really increases the costs. And then some of it's unused. And we've kind of seen a relatively standard approach that, a quarter or a third of it is just unused. We just really are not very good at figuring out a government approach that is nuanced enough for each development. So you're just seeing a lot of wasted space and wasted cost that could be used in better ways. So this kind of covers those high points, and we think there's just a lot of room to more precisely meet demand and reduce excess costs. And the last couple of points before I get into what our program requires is that parking is hidden in the cost of everything else. It's hidden in the cost of our rents, as I mentioned, home prices, lower paychecks when your employers are providing parking lots that are free. Grocery stores, et cetera. So really it's this inducement to drive. And when a group in the California Air Resources Board said, hey, if we get parking right, both in terms of quantity and pricing, we could actually cut up to about 1/6 or 1/7 of all greenhouse gas emissions if we got parking right. So we're really encouraging right now people to drive a lot by government kind of requiring a bunch of free parking everywhere you go. So there's academic research on this that, of course, if you provide a lot of something free, people consume more of it. It depends where you are, city to city, how much of that impact is, but it can be significant. And the last thing I would say about why we're reforming parking in Oregon is equity. Car ownership correlates pretty well with privilege. Richer people own a lot more cars. Homeowners own about 50% more cars than renter households on average. And across things, across various equity concerns, people with more resources, not surprisingly, consume more cars. So what happens when we take away parking mandates? Really, developers respond and they say, hey, we've got a different approach for our development. We've got a mixed-use development. People are going to be able to walk where they want. We're going to provide less parking. But if we're doing, this is what happened in Buffalo, like a lot of it stays the same because lenders are risk averse and they tend to build about as much as comparable developments, and comparable developments in the past have provided a lot of parking. So it's not a super quick change generally, but it's kind of an increase in diversity of approaches to parking approach. So we've seen that in Buffalo, we've seen that in Minneapolis, we saw that in Los Angeles, just a huge increase in housing. We just really have seen in city after city for a couple of decades before we adopted our reforms that there was a lot of waste to be squeezed out of the system, and it was saving a lot of people money and getting a lot more housing built. San Diego, Fargo, it's good for business. Here in Oregon, since we've adopted our reforms, really local builders are reapproaching things and finding ways to build more housing units, expand their businesses, and make things work better. This last picture down here is a video store owner in Tigard who decided to start serving beer, and because that was a change of use, he would have had to build a bunch more parking and spent tens of thousands of dollars, but because of our reforms, didn't have to do that. So we was able to do that. So that's kind of the why we've done what we've done. And I do want to acknowledge it's hard when the state steps in and kind of takes away some of your local decision making. I do want to acknowledge that that's a hard dynamic. But it felt like a really good case for doing something at the state level. And this is what we require in cities and metro areas like Troutdale. Our commission adopted these rules in July 2022, made some of the reforms effective January 1st last year, and then gave cities some time to update their codes. And in Troutdale, you all asked for an extension, and we provided you an extension to give you some time to finalize your code. What our program requires is kind of these three things. The last thing doesn't apply to you, and it just applies to those 7 cities in Oregon with over 100,000 people. So it's really just these first two things, kind of implementing what we think are best practices for parking code details, and then choose a parking reform approach. One of the things that went into effect in January 2023 is we said, hey, near a place with frequent transit, governments can't require parking. And so this is kind of the map that your city developed as far as what's within half a mile of Route 77. And kind of that's where you cannot require parking. The other effect that went in January 23 was kind of what we call equity uses, affordable housing, publicly subsidized housing, very small units, SROs, child care facilities, shelters, and facilities and residences serving people with disabilities. So those sorts of developments often provide parking, but we kind of leave it up to the builder of those units as to how much parking they actually need. And we kept multifamily mandates at no more than 1 space per unit. So those were kind of the big effects that we said, here are the state standards that you have to follow right now. Then we said, and it's time to update your code itself. You can't just directly apply the state standard. And these are in rules, Oregon Administrative Rules 410 and 405. And they're kind of things like saying, hey, you can't require ping pong rooms, i.e. garages. I love ping pong, but it doesn't make sense for the government to be requiring that. And kind of saying, hey, if a local builder has a creative way of providing parking offsite, then that can meet your parking requirements. We have some kind of detailed requirements about large new parking lots. When you install more than a half acre of more parking, there's some requirements in 405 about some walkability features, a climate mitigation action, a little bit of tree coverage, etc. And we said cities should figure out how to make it easy to convert existing parking if someone feels it's underutilized. The last thing we did is in Rule 410, which is saying conduit when you're building new parking, 40% of units have to have conduit installed, not the wiring, not stations, not the expensive part of EV charging, but kind of the stuff that's pennies on the dollar, as opposed to retrofitting, just putting pipes in the ground and saying, hey, put in the wiring later when the demand follows. The building code currently requires 20%. We said we really want to accelerate the EV effort and be ready for the future if it comes. Okay, so that's kind of some of the wonkier details of the rules. This is kind of the core decision we're asking each city to make. And we said, we know Oregon cities may have, you have unique preferences, you have unique situations, you may be drawn to something, but we do want each city to do some parking reform and some significant parking reform. And so she wrote up 3 options, and we developed this over a couple of years with an advisory committee and a lot of input, and we adjusted them. We made them easier to meet even after our 22 rules with input from our partners. So we weakened these, and is one way of saying it, made it easier to comply in 2023. So beyond that area near transit and beyond those uses that we already said we can't require parking mandates for, what do you do with the remaining land? And what do you do with the other types of uses? And so these are 3 options. The first option is to just say, parking mandates, people are going to build parking anyway. Let's leave it up to the market. Let's just stop using our staff time figuring out parking mandates and let local builders figure it out. So that's option 1. It's obviously the cleanest and easiest to implement from a staff time perspective. Option 2 is to implement, at least is kind of a policy approach. We call it the fair policy approach. And it's to implement at least 2 of 5 policies. And I'll get to that on the next slide. And option 3 is to kind of say, extend that list of uses and types beyond those equity uses that I listed, and have a much longer list of things, types of development that can happen without parking. But that's sort of option 3, and I'll get into that on a slide in a couple. And both options 2 and 3 kind of do some things that we've already talked about: the equity uses, frequent transit, making it easier to say, I've provided parking for my new use. The last thing on here is mandates in metro centers, so metro town centers, which I think pretty much overlays with your Route 77 map, so that probably doesn't apply. But I could be corrected by local staff. Okay, I know I'm zooming through these a little bit, but happy to go back and answer questions after my last couple of slides here. So option 2 asks you to implement at least 2 policies. And we set this up because pricing matters a lot in terms of internalizing the costs on driving, and those people who are using the public space and parking, if they can bear some of that cost, behavior changes. And that's sort of one of the goals of having a more climate friendly and equitable state. So we say you have to implement at least 2 of these 5 policies, including one of the first 3. The first 2 are called unbundling, and that's the sort of paying for parking separate from the units. So people can opt out of renting an off-street parking unit. It's kind of what happens in large cities by the market anyway, but some governments have stepped in and said, you have to do this. Similarly with commercial, and saying, hey, you can rent a commercial space without having to pay for the off-street parking combined. So this is city policies requiring this to happen in those sorts of leases. The third option is flexible commute benefits or parking cash out, saying, hey, if your employer provides free parking but you don't use it, you can say, hey, I'm saving you money, you need to give some of the back to me. The fourth is saying tax on commercial parking lots. It's possible Troutdale doesn't have any, some smaller cities do not, but you can still implement a tax on something you don't have, and that gets you credit. Although some self-storage units, if that's the majority of their income is from storing cars, that's parking. So and the last thing is reducing your multifamily parking minimums, parking mandates to no higher than half space per unit. So really letting multifamily set its own demand. So choosing at least 2 of those 3. Okay, almost done. So this is kind of the extended list beyond the equity uses that I talked about. This is option 3, saying any studio or 1 bedroom, not just those under 750 square feet, things that are transit-oriented, mixed use, new uses and expansions, so retrofits, buildings in historic districts, buildings long vacant, reach code, small businesses that don't have many employees or aren't very large, schools, bars, and kind of a half mile on top of your town center beyond that radius, peeling off mandates from that. And the last requirement here in option 3 is to do something that charges money. Residential or a benefit district. Benefit district is where you collect money and you use some of those revenues back into the area that charges money for parking, or you unbundle parking for residential. So again, and using a price mechanism of some sort. So those are options 2 and 3. And pretty much everyone is looking at that and saying options 2 and 3 are a lot of work. We think there's some best practices in option 2 and 3, but most cities are choosing to go with option 1. As you can see from the list thus far, we don't know what's going to happen. We're working with a bunch of cities that have yet to choose an option. But by and large, people in your seats have chosen to go with option 1. So that's the overview of our parking reforms and the options in front of you. I think you have engaged in that some. I wanted to give you my own take on it. And then I wanted to take your questions because there are a lot of details and nooks and crannies there that aren't necessarily clear on their face. So I will open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you. This time I would take questions from the commission. Anyone have questions? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Allen.
I would like to know how the percentages on parking utilization were arrived at. What's the math behind that?
What's the math behind that?
Second point, just a real life point. We see that when people are typically home, parking spaces fill up. When they're typically at work, they go down. And that begs the question, how are these averages decided?
Yeah, now that's a great question. Parking utilization studies, there are a couple of different varieties. The ones that just use it, how much parking is used instead of a turnover study, which is how many cars, like in a business district, you would do a turnover study of saying, hey, a car uses this space every hour. But a utilization study is just a snapshot in time. And the people who do these late at night. They usually hire some college students, or if they're a night owl, they go out and they do it somewhere after 10 o'clock at night, because they do understand that for residences, that's the peak use time, is the overnight use, because people go to work during the day and go shopping during the day and that sort of thing. So pretty much all these studies, all these data are collected in the middle of the night. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay, Commissioner Minkoff.
Thank you. The follow-up to that is, what is the average unused parking in Troutdale? I mean, if we were to take a look at Troutdale, not at King County or Albany or Bay Area or Hillsborough, but actually Troutdale, what if we find that we are 100% used? How would we decide then?
I presume that's not a question for me. I mean, you can use whatever method you want to choose among the three approaches. Yeah, it's not something that.
Well, I think that for the rest of the commission, then the other concern that I have is the other mandate about a half mile from transit corridor that is discussed, where you can't have mandates for parking. The problem is we have no transit system that goes to shopping. Line 77 does not pass by any Troutdale shopping. So just to say that within that half mile from the 77 line, we can't have a mandate, means we could lose a lot of parking for people that otherwise have no other way to get to needed services.
Yeah, I would say that generally our review of the data and the experiences over the last couple of decades is lenders figure that out and they say, well, there may be a bus line, but they can't meet their other needs, so we're going to provide a bunch of off-street parking. Or what happens is a city realizes that there's some excess parking somewhere and they do some timed parking or permit parking on one street and they nudge some people into the space that's underutilized. So that's kind of the management is cheaper and more efficient than providing a bunch of supply experience. So that's the general experience that cities have had in that sort of situation. I think that developers are out there and they're generally risk averse, and lenders are even more risk averse. So when they think that the culture or the needs of a community are to have a bunch of off-street parking, if they want to stay in business, they provide it.
A follow-up question is, in line with this, since this is forced upon us by the state, what accommodations is the state discussing about additional funding for cities to provide more mass transit while they reduce the number of parking spaces?
Yeah, well, DLCD does not have statutory authority over transit districts. So that's not our bit. We certainly are aware of the payroll tax that was allowed more recently to expand transit. And we certainly would encourage efforts to fund more robust transportation options for people. But that's not our authority, and that's not that if you see that demand there, I encourage you to talk to your legislators about that.
Commissioner Allen?
Just an observation. When I was a city councilor, I would have meetings in Portland. And when I'm just talking with people, what I found out is that people in the downtown area of Portland could generally walk easily to where they need to go and get to the services they needed. They were fine, right? But as we got away from city center, then I was running into people where the predominant discussions were that I would love to have a car, but there's no place to park, so I don't have a car. That becomes your 1 in 6, right? They would love to have it, but they can't because there's no place to park it even if they want to. And so that limited their options as to where they could work. And also made it more difficult for them to actually do the services, go to the grocery or the drugstore or whatever they needed. And it becomes quite an inhibitor if you don't have those close services. So it seems like as we become further and further away from city center, such as Troutdale is, this becomes much, much more of a difficult situation that we're putting our population in. Another observation is, one thing he did say is true. When I was a younger person, I didn't have much money. I was probably had less than most, right? And I had, as I got older, and then I'm in a situation where I have more than most, I have more than one car. But also I'm no longer living in an apartment. I have a house, I have a place to park it, right? But one advantage I noticed is when I had more options as to what to drive, instead of driving that pickup truck that got 11, 12 miles per gallon that I needed in order to do some odd jobs from time to time, I was able to choose, well, we have a Hyundai Ioniq, 60 miles per gallon on the open road. That thing's incredible. I love the technology. And so I have choices now that I didn't have as a younger person. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to have more cars. Because most people, no matter how much they have, they don't want to waste money. They're going to pick the car that's appropriate for the job at hand.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's commentary, and I don't need to respond to every difference of opinion here or different commentary. I would say that uh, I am frustrated by how relatively poorly well, I see a lot of opportunity for Portland to manage its on-street parking better, so people can find parking spaces. Um, the goal of parking reform is not to make it impossible to park. It's in part to uh, help people find a space um, that maybe they have to pay for. In parking, you can have in high demand areas. You can choose 2 out of 3, free, convenient, and available. So you may be able to get lucky and park right in front of your home or your business, but it may not be available. If you're willing to walk a few blocks, you can have free and available. And if you want available and convenient, you might have to pay a little bit of money. And because real estate, 200, 300 square feet of real estate in an urban center or in a high demand area is worth something, paying a little bit seems like a reasonable approach to me. And often that's politically hard for a city council to do. I do understand that. But I do also want to just kind of highlight that often it's just the poorest people might not have any motor vehicles. Like that 1 in 6 renter households that don't own vehicles is overwhelmingly the poorest among us. And so those people are the ones paying for parking they're not using. You can kind of see that. So.
Commissioner Prickett.
My question is that when you limit parking in multifamily and the overspill is onto a thoroughfare and 2 cars can't pass through it because they're parked on both sides of the street, it makes it harder for the person that has to go somewhere to travel, which wastes time. In a city bus in Troutdale, it takes me probably an hour to go by bus to downtown Portland, which is, for me, is not, would not be bad. But if you're in a time crunch and have to get to work, it's not feasible from here because you have to transfer 2 or 3 times before you even get downtown.
It takes me 45 minutes to get from home to work, which is 2.5 miles away.
Right.
I take transit.
So I'm not sure what the answer is here. But in Portland, where they do limit parking in multifamily, they say they don't have 1 car per unit, but they're all out parking on the street even when they're full. So I'm not sure if that standard would work as well here.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly management of parking is an issue, and management of on-street parking is an issue, and spillover parking, which is generally more car demand for a use than is provided on that off-street parking, is something that people have to manage. This is an example of signs that businesses and the city have put up within a half mile of my home in Salem. And you can kind of see people have figured this out. People have figured out, oh, this is who I want parking. This is how much time I'm going to provide for them. And that's my decision as a business or as the city. So dealing with spillover parking, managing parking is something that cities may have to do some more of. And we've hired a consultant to provide a parking management jumpstart guide to kind of help cities think through that. You obviously have, I think, 2-hour parking in your core So you're doing some of this as well. You figured out some of this. But yeah, it's parking management is part of the puzzle to efficiently use city resources. Yeah, Paul.
Commissioner Wilcox?
Thank you, Chair Stephenson. I have a couple specific questions. Later in this meeting, we have a couple applications. They're businesses located in shopping centers. And my question is there any guidance on how unbundled commercial parking would work in a shopping center setting where you've got a shared parking lot? And my second question is, you mentioned when you were going over Reform B2, number 4, taxing commercial parking. You mentioned it could apply to vehicle storage facilities. And I happen to know there is a storage facility in Troutdale that stores RVs, basically, travel trailers, motorhomes. So I was wondering if that would qualify and be taxable. And I think that will do me for now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Wilcox, and I apologize for speaking out of turn. I'm used to Zoom meetings and not being there. Some of the norms, I apologize that I called on somebody instead. So I apologize to the commission. So the first question I believe was about unbundling and commercial in a shopping center, and the short answer is that's not something we've provided guidance on. That would be up to something I can noodle on and something I can get back to you on. I think that if there's any implication in the lease that you're leasing, access to certain parking spaces, that you should be able to opt out of that in your lease. But again, it's a question that has not come up yet, in part because most cities haven't been going after the unbundling policy, but that's something I can look into and get back to you on. As far as the second question, the tax on commercial parking units or parking lots is about the primary use of a site, but the parking itself is defined as for automobile storage. So for automobiles. So I don't think an RVs probably fit under that definition, and it's possible that if it's a mixed use, that they're storing boats and trailers and RVs as well as cars, that it doesn't fall into the commercial parking definition for the purpose of levying a tax. It would kind of depend on some of those details there, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Commissioner Prickett reminded me of an incident where my mother-in-law, she didn't have a car because she reached that age where she couldn't really drive, right? And so we were going to her place to take care of her. Well, there was no parking. And so, kind of like you said, streets full, both sides, parking lots full. And we found ourselves driving around and around and around, waiting for some place to open up. Now, I have a hard time believing that that's climate friendly, especially when the car's at its most inefficient point, is when it's stopping and going and stopping and going and just trying to find a place. We're not doing ourselves any favor, or the climate any favor, by doing this sort of thing. And as you just reminded me of that, it just, at some point, it doesn't make sense. And to have the same solution statewide, that just, we're not the same as Portland. Our situation is different.
And we're not the same as rural Oregon either.
Right. And walking uphill to, half a mile uphill to find a bus stop that may or may not take you to shopping.
No, No, I certainly appreciate that point, and it kind of circles back to that point that on-street parking management is important, and the state does not discourage or limit the amount of on-street parking management cities can use. We actually encourage you to efficiently look at parking management challenges. Parking is a very spatially unique challenge. It's very, very local. It's hyper local. It can be, Independence had a parking problem, and we went and we looked and we said, okay, you have a parking problem exactly 1 block this way, 1 block this way, and 1 block this way. How should we manage this? Let's do some timed stuff and nudge some of the employees to have to walk a block. So that's similarly, it sounds like you do have an on-street parking congestion issue in that place that you're talking about. And the city might want to come in and say, all right, some people should be encouraged to walk a block or two so that visitors to whatever, I'm not sure if it's a retirement community or whatever it was, can visit in an appropriate way. So yeah, I think that parking management is important because we don't think that driving around in circles looking for something is good for anyone. And that's why the city has a responsibility, or the property owners have a responsibility to collectively make sure that people can park when they arrive somewhere.
I think it's very hard to fix parking after the fact, after the buildings and the limited spaces are there. That's very hard to fix. And so we could be creating ourselves a problem here that we're going to regret in future generations.
No, that's
Well, I say that people are going to actually build the parking spaces that are needed. There's just too many examples to say that's not always true. That would be a false statement that builders will just build the number of spaces that they're going to need. They don't necessarily do that. We see plenty of examples where that didn't happen.
I have a question regarding the option to levy a tax. Is that a state tax or a city tax?
that's a local tax. That's a city tax.
Okay. Commissioner Wilcox.
No, I don't have anything right now.
I'll just, I just want to make a comment, the 1 in 6 is multifamily, right? And if we're only requiring half a space for multifamily and 40% of those are EV, are we not kind of exasperating the problem, especially in the short term? We're making it somewhat almost impossible for those poorer people to have an automobile.
I'm sorry. So just to clarify, the EV conduit requirement is not that you don't have to designate any spaces for EV cars at all. It's just a tube you're putting in the ground so that if in the future you want to use it for an EV parking space, you can wire it and put in a charger. So if that's a clarification, I'm not sure I understood the question.
So you're correct. It doesn't mandate it, but it is a cost to put it in the ground and all of that. It just, in a community like ours, it just makes it challenging to be able to do this. And I'll just say that I think most developers would probably put in units before they would put in parking if they were given a choice, because there's rental income on those. And if we look at a business and they have to unbundle parking, if I was doing it, I would probably put in less parking, because I'd have to lease that separately, I'd have to maintain that separately, I'd have to do everything with that separately. So if I had a choice of not doing it at all, I would probably take it. I wish that we could trust the market to always do what we wanted it to. But if that was the case, we wouldn't have the magnitude of housing laws that we have coming down right now, because we don't trust the market.
Plus, we have to consider, just dovetailing on what you said, that if builders could build only units and no parking, I mean, that's an extreme, but that's where they would lean. I doubt that that's the case, because they couldn't fill, as Commissioner Allen said, they couldn't fill all of the units with people that need to be able to park their car.
Well, you might want to look at vacancy rates at that. If there's no vacancy rates, you're going to live in a place you don't want to live just because you need someplace to live. Right? Our vacancy rate used to be a health percent. Now it's way down there. We haven't really created buildable areas. We haven't kept up with the demand.
There's a balance somewhere, and we try to find it.
Yeah, I love parking policy and I love parking data. I love these parking conversations. I'm not really here to debate whether the policy should or shouldn't be what it is. I'm happy to tell, in Salem, when Salem reformed parking, 12 of the 15 multifamily developments that came in soon after that provided off-street parking. 3 didn't. But there are a fair number of students in Salem, and there are a fair amount of traveling nurses and things like that. There's kind of an eds and beds business model that they talk about that is used. But the person who built that building needed to get lending from out of state, because most local lenders wouldn't do it. So it really does depend, and I'm happy to have that discussion. But if there are any more questions about the policy choices in front of you, I'm happy to provide some kind of technical answers instead of just kind of having this ongoing disagreement, which is, it's great to hear the concerns, great to hear the questions, and I'm happy to continue that if you're finding that useful. Otherwise, I'm happy to just answer technical questions and let you be frustrated at the state and having that disagreement.
Ms. Palmer?
I just want to thank Evan for your time this evening and coming to speak to the commission about these new parking policies, that we're going to have to work through and to implement in the future. I have this PowerPoint presentation, so I will distribute it to the commission tomorrow. And my intent here tonight is for all of you to think about this presentation and the things that Evan has presented tonight, and we will come back in April. So I want you to really kind of digest this information so we can come back and talk about what kind of information you might need from staff to help you move forward.
Thank you, and Commissioner Wilcox and the rest of the commission, I will try to think on that shopping center question and unbundled commercial parking for you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, come on forward.
Sure.
Yeah. Just as a comment.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
Joe Storty, I'm the code compliance officer here, and I enforce parking all day, every day. I was a police officer here for 25 years. I don't think Mr. Upham is in touch with what goes on here, and it just seems like apples and oranges. This isn't Minneapolis, this isn't LA, this isn't any of those cities he had there. This is a livability issue, and you look at spots like where Mr. Wilcox lives, Morgan Meadows, Lancaster, up on Second where the condos are, any of those places that are all built in tight and there's no parking to begin with. You have one space per condo. It puts neighbor against neighbor. And oh my God, this guy's parking in front of my house and I can't park in front of my house, and there's disputes about who can park on the public right of way, and, you know, who has the authority, you know, and if you put, you know, 10 or 15 rats in a small area, they start to feed on each other. And my experience is that's what happens when you have all of these high density, you know, living spaces. I've seen it in apartments like Hewitt and Troutdale Terrace. All the neighbors start fighting with each other, and it might start over a parking spot. But I'll tell you, there's a hell of a lot of disturbances I go to and mediate disputes every day, all day about parking. So I just had a case today where we had a car dealer that's in town here was parking 33 cars on the public right of way that belonged to the car dealership. You know, we won that case because they're not supposed to be storing their cars out there for sale, but it applies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? No? Okay. All righty. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next agenda item. And before I read what those agenda items are, I'd like to explain a little bit about the Planning Commission and the procedure that we will be following for tonight's public hearing. The Planning Commission is a 7-member volunteer body of Troutdale citizens. Members of the Planning Commission are Troutdale residents who've been appointed by the City Council. They serve 4-year terms. They are strictly volunteers and receive no pay for their services. The Planning Commission serves as a citizen committee for the review of land use applications and various land use related matters within the city. Items which the Planning Commission consider include uses of land, subdivisions, major variances, land use policy plans, and development regulations. For some land use applications, the Planning Commission makes a final decision. For other applications, they are simply making a recommendation to the City Council, who renders the final decision. Quasi-judicial public hearings are held in accordance with Oregon law and procedures contained in the Troutdale Development Code. And for these procedures, the Planning Commission will be making the final decision this evening. The hearing will proceed as follows. City staff will present their report, which includes applicable criteria and standards for the matter under consideration in the land use application. All testimony and evidence should be directed towards these criteria. If you believe that other criteria in the comprehensive plan, development code, or other city land use regulations apply, you must identify these criteria and explain why they apply to the decision. The Planning Commission accepts public testimony relating to the application. The applicant is allowed to speak first, followed by proponents, then by opponents, and then by any parties neutral to the application. An opportunity will be provided to anyone testifying to clarify any issues raised. All issues raised by a participant during the public hearing must be sufficiently clear and specific to allow the Planning Commission and other parties an opportunity to respond to those issues. Failure to raise an issue during this public hearing may invalidate a future appeal based on that issue. Prior to closing the public hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony regarding the application. The Planning Commission must grant the request either by continuing the public hearing to a future date or by leaving the record open for at least 7 days to admit only that specific additional written evidence or testimony. If the record is left open for the additional written evidence or testimony, any participant may file a written request for an opportunity to respond to new evidence submitted during the period the record was left open. If such a request is filed, the Planning Commission shall reopen the record to allow any person to raise new issues which relate to the new evidence, testimony, or criteria for decision-making. And as I said, both of these are type 3 applications this evening, quasi-judicial hearings for case file LU 0005-2024, East County Pickleball Courts, and case file LU 0007-2024, Checkmate Portland. And before I open the public hearing this evening, I would like to ask if, other than driving by, and I'll do these together, either one of these sites, does anyone have any ex parte conflict, conflict of interest, ex parte communication, bias? No? I, on the other hand, have to state that the first application, which is 27100 Southeast Stark, my former company built that site, and we operated it for about 5 years. And so I'm probably more familiar with that site than most people. And so I'm opening that up in case anyone thinks there's.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
I don't personally have any bias. I've worked on that building, and I've washed windows on that building, and let's see. Oh, and I've been sued by the owner of that building. But I have a strong moral ethic to treat people fairly, regardless of who they are. So I don't personally have any problem with it.
Any challenges from the commission? Okay. Paul, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. Then with that, I'm going to go ahead and, as far as if you plan to testify this evening, please state your name and address clearly for the record. And we will take them in order of proponent, opponent, and then neutral parties. And that will be your only opportunity to testify during that period. And if you could limit your comments to 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. Okay?
Just so you know, we do have cards that community can fill out.
So if you're planning on testifying, please grab one of the cards and fill it out, if you wouldn't mind. And with that, we will open the public hearing for case file LU 00052024, East County Pickleball Courts. Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm going to pull up my brief presentation. All right. Thank you again, commissioners. My name is Dakota Meyer. I'm the associate planner here at the city of Troutdale. Tonight I will be presenting the staff report for the proposed conditional use for East County Pickleball Courts case file LU 0005-2024. This is a slide with just some brief site background information. The site is located in Troutdale Market Center. The address is 27100 Southeast Stark. The zoning is community commercial, and then the surrounding zonings to the north is undeveloped farmland designated for community commercial and high density residential. The east and south are medium density residential, and the west is open space. Here's a street view from the parking lot of the proposed site. This is building 300. And here is the site plan submitted by the applicant, just showing the entirety of the site of Troutdale Market. So the site in question tonight for the proposed pickleball courts is in this section right here, building 300. What we will be requesting tonight is for a conditional use for an indoor pickleball facility consisting of 12 certified courts within the existing retail tenant space in the community commercial zone. What is not being requested is any sort of zone change or any exterior modifications, strictly interior. Applicable criteria that's applicable to this application is the comprehensive land use plan, Troutdale Development Code, section chapters 1, chapters 2, section 3.10, community commercial zone, section 6.3, conditional use, chapter 9, off-street parking and loading, and then chapter 17, general provisions. As on top of those provisions, there's also appropriate building and fire codes, construction standards for public works, and then relevant standards of the ORS Oregon Revised Statutes, and OAR, Oregon Administrative Rules. This review procedure is a type 3 quasi-judicial, as Chair Stephenson had mentioned. It's a public hearing. The Planning Commission is the decision-making entity. If there is an appeal, it would be appealed to City Council. To the right, there's a timeline, just a brief timeline of what for this project. There's a building permit submitted. That's what brought this to our attention in December. February, the applicant submitted their materials, deemed complete on February 16th. Notice of public hearing was sent out on February 21st. Tonight is the public hearing. If approved, the applicant's business license can be approved and move forward with any relevant building permits. Here is a list of the notifications in summary. This notification was sent out to property owners within 500 feet. Agencies were the planning division, Public Works, Building, Gresham Fire, Multnomah County Transportation Planning as well. We did receive one public comment in favor of the proposed use. Summary of the comments suggests that it can be approved with conditions of approval. Next, I'm going to go through the criteria specific to the conditional use application and the findings associated with those criteria. Criteria A is the use is listed as commercial or conditional use in the underlying district or approved by the Planning Commission as similar to conditional use listed in the underlying district. Staff finds the property is located within the community commercial zone. Residential facilities active are listed as a conditional use within the community commercial zone. Sports courts are included in the definition of recreation active. Here we find the criteria met. B, the characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use, considering size, shape, location, topography, existence of improvements, and natural features. Staff finds the characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use of a sports course facility. The site had previously been a gymnastics studio, which also falls under recreation active use. The 38,000 square foot, one-story space is fully sprinklered and will adequately accommodate the 12 proposed pickleball courts. The site is located within an existing shopping center, Troutdale Market Center, with 382 shared parking spaces, which exceeds the minimum required for active recreation use. The applicant currently has building permits under review for all proposed improvements to the interior of the existing building. There are no concerns with topography or natural features for the site. Therefore, staff finds this is a suitable site for the use. Criteria C, all transportation systems, public facilities, and public services related to the proposed development have or can be improved to have adequate capacity to serve the proposed development at the time of completion. All transportation systems, public facilities, and public services currently exist on site and have adequate capacity to serve the proposed sports court. The site had previously been a grocery store, church, gymnastics studio, and then a film studio, and designed for a high level of commercial activity with ample parking. The site has access to TriMet Bus Route 80, which is located in the northwest corner of the property at the intersection of Southeast Stark Street and South Troutdale Road. Troutdale Market Center is accessed via Southeast Stark, which is an arterial, and South Troutdale Road, which is a collector, both which are maintained by Multnomah County. Multnomah County Transportation Division has reviewed this application and provided an extra condition of approval. No new access or utility modifications are being proposed with this application. Staff finds all criteria are met. Criteria D, the proposed use will provide adequate open space, landscaping, and aesthetic design to mitigate any possible adverse effect on the surrounding properties and uses. The property is already developed, it's existing, and exceeds both parking and landscaping requirements. The landscaping requirement is 15%, and the site currently has 17.4%. The many different uses on site require a parking minimum of 455 spaces. 341 spaces if they utilize section 9.065B of the Troutdale Development Code, which allows for a reduction in required spaces on a single parcel with multiple uses sharing parking. The site currently provides 382 spaces. There are 12 short-term and 21 long-term existing bike parking spaces on site, which exceeds the minimum requirements for both short and long-term bicycle parking. Therefore, staff finds this criteria is met. Criteria E, the proposed use as conditioned will not cause or result or not result in the creation of a public nuisance, including but not limited to air, land, or water degradation, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or other impacts that may be injurious to public health, safety, and welfare. The proposed use will not cause or result in the creation of any public nuisance to public health, safety, or welfare. The proposed sports courts are located entirely within Building 300 and will not cause any public nuisance to the surrounding area, as noise will be enclosed within the soundproof interior space. No exterior sports courts are proposed with this application. Staff finds this criteria is met. And then criteria F, the proposal satisfies the applicable provisions of this code. This is pretty self-explanatory. The proposal satisfies the applicable provisions as mentioned before. Staff finds this is met. For staff recommendation, staff offers the following recommendation for the conduct of the March 13th, 2024 public hearing regarding the proposed conditional use for East County pickleball courts. Staff recommends approval with conditions of case file LU 00052024. Here's a list of the conditions of approval, which everybody has in their packet. If you'd like, I'd be happy to go through these, or if you've read them, we can move forward. Okay. And then we're on to public testimony. And that's all I have.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Allen?
I know this isn't us, but I was curious. Basically, if you look at the previous uses that you had mentioned there, you know, church and gymnastics and so forth, especially, you know, gymnastics as far as it's very similar to being pickleball courts, right? So I don't really see a problem there. It seems to me that with this online world, that retail's under pressure, especially when that retail is far away from the population center, at the edge of the population center. So we need to consider these things, right? But what surprised me is that going from a use that's very similar to a use that's very similar, it seems like an unnecessary expense to have them do a traffic study for something that really hasn't actually been a problem in the city. But I know that's coming from Monoma County Transportation.
Correct.
It just, that part of it just seemed wrong to me when I read that.
What I can answer to that is the previous tenant, which was the film studio, also is required to go through a traffic impact analysis or
And that would
traffic
have
study.
most likely been less, so.
It's a requirement since it's off of their roads, both South Troutdale Road and Stark Street. So they just have to make sure that nothing is, it's not going to increase the flow of traffic on the arterial and collector.
If I'm reading this correctly, it doesn't require a TIA.
No, it requires a memo, and then that memo may trigger a TIA, but they won't know until the memo is submitted.
So it may not be as expensive. Still have to hire an engineer, but it may not be as expensive. All right.
Other questions? Commissioner Wilcox, any questions? Yes, you do. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Chair Stephenson. Couple areas I'm looking at. Under findings of fact, paragraph B, I see, well, it's been mentioned also that it was previously a gymnastics studio. Wanted to double check that that also required a type 3 conditional hearing. I don't know how long ago that was, because I know it was a film studio most recently. And then further on in the same paragraph, it reads, the site is located within an existing shopping center with 382 shared parking spaces, which exceeds the minimum required for active recreation use. The way that reads is if the entire shopping center complex were turned over to, you know, all manner of active recreation uses, would it really require or call for 382 spaces, or actually the 455 that are in paragraph D? I'm kind of thinking that you know, the 455 that were called for originally were probably when there was a grocery store and a whole lot more retail there than there is now. So it looked kind of funny to see a pickleball court, you know, calling for 382 spaces. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
So as for the gymnastics studio, I did some digging and I could not find that they had to go through a conditional use. Now, I'm not sure when that was I believe it was in 2019. So I'm not sure if the plan, or no, it was prior, because it was the film studio was in 2019. So it was much earlier than that. I wasn't here at the time. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure what either the planner or the director at the time looked at it as, if they didn't feel that it fell within the same type of use as we are reading it now, which is the active recreation. Currently, that's how our code reads. There could have been changes to that section, but that's why we're going through that now. If that was something that was missed back then, we want to make sure that we're not making those kinds of misses now. So that's my quick response to
So
that.
it would have expired anyhow.
Yeah, because the use changed.
It may have come up before council and not yet passed.
That's
Because I remember discussing it.
It's pretty hard to do that.
It is.
Yeah, because that's a type 3, it would come here.
Yeah.
Unless it was appealed. There we go.
Oh.
And then for the other part of your question, Commissioner Wilcox, looking at the parking, so the required parking spaces for an active recreation use is based on a percentage per square foot. So I believe that calculation, now I don't have it in front of me, is right around 162 for that sole purpose. Given that it's a part of a shopping center with shared parking, if you actually look at each of the uses within that shopping center, that's what adds up to 450 required parking spaces. But they're able to reduce that number down to the, I have it here. Yeah, they're able to reduce it down to 341, given that they are all sharing that space. And that's the whole entire space, since it's a shared, that's how we calculate parking. And that's why they are actually providing over the number, which is 382 spaces. So that's why I know it's a little confusing with all those numbers, but I wanted to put them in there so that way you have a real understanding of this is how much would be, this is how they brought it down. Because if you wanted to go to the code and research and like, hey, all of these spaces adds up to 455, how did they drop it down? Well, section 9.065B allows them to reduce it. And then that's why they're actually providing over the minimum, which is 341. So they're providing 382 over the minimum requirement.
Commissioner Wilcox?
Okay, I follow all your numbers. I just didn't feel like the 382 strictly applied to that facility's square footage.
Not specifically to the building 300, but as we calculate, we have to calculate it all together, since it's a part of all shared parking. So okay. That's not specific to the pickleball facility. It's specific to the entirety of the parking that's provided, because that's how we have to calculate it based on our code.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
It's bundled parking. No,
Under the new mandates, we don't even have to have parking, do we?
One question that I had was, how Public Works, I noticed we were talking about SDCs. What SDCs would we have? I guess that's up to them, but it'd be kind of surprising if this use was requiring SDCs based on the prior use.
Yeah, that's a requirement they have to reach out to. I think it said they may require SDCs. I know during the previous use for the film studio, Public Works did require them to do some upgrades to the systems, which they had done. So I think these are more of a, hey, check in with us type of comment. And that's why you'll notice they don't have anything under a condition of approval. It's more of a comment that they recommend, hey, just reach out to them and make sure there's nothing that they need.
Commissioner Wilcox?
No, nothing else.
Okay. You had your hand up. All right, if there's nothing else, okay.
Is there already an address on that building?
There is an address on the building, but you wouldn't expect, fire department to look at it or something, I don't know.
You'll notice that some of the comments, for example, with fire, they're a little more boilerplate. That is all done through building. So they kind of add those initially, and because if they didn't have an address, that would be done through building process, and that's a requirement that they would have to go through with building to get that requirement for fire. So that's more of a boilerplate comment and condition. They have an address, the address will not be changing, and it's basically just reaffirmed through the building permit process, which they already have submitted. They're going through a concurrent review right now.
It's just an extra step.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for staff?
Yeah,
Commissioner
Chair.
Andrews?
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to point out, on the Public Works memo, it does detail that there is no modification to the facility's water service. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't going to counteract with the fire department's recommendation, or requirement rather, that the hydrants and parts thereof will have to be modified in order to make sure that that's lining up. On sub-point 2, yeah.
And again, that's kind of a similar, that's kind of more of a boilerplate one that they have for all.
Okay.
They don't go out there and check them regularly. They say, hey, make sure that they meet this
Okay.
requirement. They were checked for the previous use and nothing has changed, and the fire codes have not changed.
Okay.
On that note, they changed.
Mr. Allen?
Just some history. When it was becoming a gymnastics building, the fire chief at the time did their inspection and made them do fire upgrades at that time. So unless the codes changed, they're probably pretty good.
Yeah, the building is fully sprinklered as well.
Yeah,
Right.
it was sprinklered.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, if nothing else, you can invite the applicant to come forward, please.
Hello.
Good evening.
How are you?
How are you?
Fantastic.
Okay, if you guys could just state your name and address for the record.
Stacy Bloom, you want us to do the building address or our address? Which address?
You, just whatever address you'd like us to mail.
Okay, we'll do
things
27100 Southeast Stark Street.
Good evening, Amelia Salvador. The address of the facility is 27100 Southeast Stark Street.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Any questions for the applicant? Is there anything you want to tell us?
We're super excited. It's coming along.
So just to give you a synopsis and a brief of our facilities, we've done a lot of research on pickleball facilities here within the region. This court facility is going to be the largest in the state of Oregon, as we know it, with 12 indoor courts. Our installer likes to brag and likes to say it's within the state of Oregon and the West Coast, but we're not quite sure.
We're going to verify that.
Yes. So we're excited to bring this facility here to the city of Troutdale. We see it being a very great destination location for our community, as well as the city, bring in some revenue and host some tournaments and just bring the attraction here to the city.
Questions for the applicant? Oh, sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say, we did get one comment, which was favorable, and I would have to agree with them. I think this is an excellent idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Zach. I'm also on the Parks Advisory Committee, and that's been a large conversation point for, I think, a lot of citizens here in the city, as far as the desire to have that. So, like you said, you've done your research and whatnot, but yeah, I imagine it's probably going to be like a membership style, like gym sort of.
Yeah, as a matter of fact,
Model.
we were discussing that today, and we're gonna have different levels, so you can have a yearly membership or pay monthly or just drop in. So we're gonna make it very flexible
Great.
for people, for sure. Yep, we should be going online hopefully in the next couple weeks or so. So you'll be seeing us pop up for sure.
One comment I would like to add as well is that we did do the research as far as indoor-outdoor facilities. The complaint with outdoor facilities and/or courts is the noise of the balls with the paddles. So with that being said, we will not have that issue here, being everything is indoor, soundproof. We were very conscious of all the neighbors and residents to make sure we weren't going to be loud and noisy.
Not to mention the rain's coming outside of.
I know, that's helpful.
It's a huge plus.
We'll be good under an ice storm, so.
Yeah.
This is great. Frankly, we've been looking at pickleball for a while, and noise has been an issue, and this really is a way to solve it for the community.
Awesome. So we expect to see all of you sign up soon, right?
Commissioner Lehman?
Yeah, I was going to say the noise thing that, there's been a great desire to bring pickleball to our area, and our former neighborhood that we used to live in.
Yes.
They wanted to bring one down into Sandy Palisades, and it was the noise and the traffic and everything. So Troutdale gets what they wanted, and people can't complain.
And the wind is kind of disruptive to the game.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I know of pickleball because where our beach house is, they use the local tennis court as the pickleball. It is loud, but at the beach, everything's loud.
Right.
So. But it's fair weather. When you have fair weather, you play pickleball. When you don't have fair weather, you can't play pickleball. But this is a great idea. It's about time it came in games instead of stuff. And you don't lose as many balls.
Right.
Pictures I've seen, it's looking good in there.
It is. It's getting there. You should come by.
Anything, Commissioner Wilcox? Question for the applicant?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. If no one has anything else, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Anyone wishing to testify as a proponent to the application this evening? Anyone wishing to testify as an opponent to the application? Any neutral parties wishing to testify? Okay.
I move that we close the public hearing.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Prickett, second by Commissioner Minkoff to close the public hearing. All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed. Any comments? Okay.
I didn't think that was gonna take very long.
No, it shouldn't. How about we do, okay, for conditions, then final order and finding fact. Okay, all right. So we want to do conditions first? Okay, here we go.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Prickett.
I move that we approve this application of the proposed conditions of approval as written.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the conditions of approval for case file LU 0005-2024 East County Pickleball Court. Any discussion on the motion? No? Okay. Could we call the roll, please? Caught you off guard, sorry about that.
Commissioner Andrews,
Yes.
Commissioner Minkoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Leamy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Prickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilcox,
Yes.
Chair Stephenson,
Yes,
and Commissioner Allen.
Yes.
okay, that passes. Okay, next motion. Hang on, one more. All right. Finding of fact.
Mr. Chair, now I've lost my mind there. I got so excited. I would like to approve the findings of fact for LU 005-2024 East County Pickleball Court, sorry, that's a lot of in the mouth, as written,
And final order?
and final order, as written.
Okay. All right, we have a second on the motion.
This is Zach, I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Prickett, second by Commissioner Andrews to approve finding of fact and final order for case file LU 0005-2024 East County Pickleball Courts. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Ms. Washington?
Commissioner Andrews,
Yes.
Commissioner Minkoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Leamy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Prickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilcox,
Yes.
Chair Stephenson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Allen.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Thank you.
Now you can say yes.
Okay.
God, well. We get a discount, right?
Stop it.
Oh, okay. I'll file it on my form.
All right, now we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is case file LU 0007-2024 Checkmate Portland.
All right, thank you, commissioners.
Okay, this is type 3.
I don't think, I've met a few of you, but not all of you. If you've heard talk, there's another planner. That's me. It's good to meet you guys. It's been a while. Yay. Hey. So LU 0007, Checkmate Portland, for the conditional use permit, and here's the staff presentation. Site background, our applicant is Antonio Roberto Caballero Jr. That's at the Columbia Gorge Outlets, 450 Northwest 257th Way, Suite 354. It's zoned general commercial within the town center overlay. The proposed use is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu site. Surrounding uses are varied retail uses. Here's the street view, if anyone's unfamiliar with the outlets. Here's the proposed floor plan. Not a lot's changing. The majority of the site is going to be taken up as mats. There's going to be a front desk storage. There's going to be some seating and benches along the mats, a restroom in the back, and additional storage in the back. Very similar to the previous conditional use permit, what is being asked of you guys. A conditional use permit decision for a jiu-jitsu studio at Suite 354 at the Columbia Gorge Outlets. What is not being requested, a zoning change, nor any new exterior additions, changes to footprint, changes to exterior design or facade, alterations to the off-street parking area. Applicable criteria, I'll kind of roll through this if that's okay. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Section 3.312. Town center overlay. I want to make a comment. I don't have findings for the town center overlay. The elements that this section deals with are design standards, off-street parking design, access. None of that's being tampered with. None of that's being triggered. I didn't feel it was appropriate to include in the report. Are there any issues with that?
wouldn't you state it as the conditions are met?
Yes.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
That'd be okay.
Mhm.
Since it is in that overlay, just stating that those conditions are met.
Okay, no worries. Section 6.300, Chapter 9, Chapter 17, Building and Fire Codes and Public Works Standards. Review procedure, type 3, quasi-judicial procedure. We're at a public hearing right now. If there's an appeal, we'll go to city council. Timeline, this started with a business license. I found the use was a conditional use, which triggered this whole process. You're welcome to read the timeline if you'd like. We've received agency comments from Planning, Public Works, and Building, as well as Gresham Fire and Emergency Services and Multnomah County Transportation. No public comments have been received. The summary of received comments have suggested that the permit can be issued with conditions of approval. Decision criteria A, are we all okay if I don't read the actual criteria and get to the findings? Okay. The proposed use at the subject site is a jiu-jitsu studio. Per the Troutdale Development Code General Definitions 1020, a jiu-jitsu studio most closely falls under the recreation facility active. A TDC defines active recreation as a place or use that contains facilities or features that includes recreational components beyond those of a typical passive park. These amenities include but are not limited to sports fields, sports courts, skateboard facilities, indoor recreation facilities, and so on. Due to TDC not having a gym or similar type use, the jiu-jitsu studio most closely resembles an indoor recreation facility and is within the recreation facility active use. The subject property is zoned general commercial under TDC land use table for commercial zoning districts 3.320. It lists recreation facility active as a conditionally approved use, therefore this criteria is met. B, characteristics of the site. The proposed location of the jiu-jitsu studio is at 450 Northwest 257th Way, Suite 354 at Columbia Gorge Outlets. The site already exists and is approximately 2,700 square feet in size, which is a more than adequate size and shape to accommodate the proposed use. The majority of the space will be used for mats, and there will be a front desk and waiting area, seating adjacent to the mats, small storage areas for items related to the use, and a restroom. The existing improvements adequately serve the proposed site plan. Based on the most recent parking study for the subject property, I took this from a previous land use in 2019. 450 Northwest 257th Way provides 840 vehicle parking spaces. At the time of the review, the minimum required parking for the site is 671. The provided parking well exceeds the minimum required parking by 169 spaces. Despite no trip generation report submitted, the anticipated trip generation of Checkmate Portland is not anticipated to exceed the outlet's current parking capacity. As far as location, the location was strategically chosen to allow easy access from I-84. It's anticipated that students and families will travel from nearby cities. There are no concerns related to topography or natural features of the site that would impact the proposed use. As such, this criterion is met. C, 450 Northwest 257th Way, Suite 354 is accessed via Northwest Graham Road, an arterial road maintained by Multnomah County, and Northwest 257th Way, a local road maintained by the city of Troutdale. The applicant has not provided a trip generation estimation report. Checkmate Portland's trip generation is anticipated to have a negligible impact on Northwest Graham Road. However, Multnomah County has required a trip generation memorandum to be submitted as a condition of approval to confirm the existing transportation systems can accommodate the proposed use. As for Northwest 257th Way, this local road is designed and engineered with the Columbia Gorge outlets in mind. This local road has the capacity to accommodate the traffic generation of a fully occupied outlet mall. Currently, the outlet mall has a number of vacancies. Considering the road can accommodate a fully occupied outlet mall, and it's not right now, it's not anticipated to have a significant impact. So he continued, In addition to the above accesses, the outlets can be accessed via TriMet bus route 77 and 81. They have stops right at the intersection of Graham and 257. The potential impacts on public facilities and services. The City of Troutdale Public Works Department was asked to provide comments and conditions for the conditional use. Public Works Director Travis Holden has provided comments stating there are no comments, conditions, or requirements of this use. Based on this comment, we can conclude the existing public systems and facilities are more than adequate to accommodate the proposed conditional use. As such, this criterion is met. D. The proposed use has no open space standards per TDC, and no open space areas are going to be installed. Therefore, open space or lack thereof is creating no adverse effects on the surrounding properties or uses. Landscaping is triggered during construction or new development or modification of parking areas. No changes are occurring to the footprint or exterior of the suite nor parking area. Therefore, landscaping is not applicable to this review. The aesthetic design of Suite 354 is consistent with the aesthetic design of Columbia Gorge Outlets and imposes no adverse effects. As such, this criterion is met. E. No nuisances are anticipated as a result of the proposed use. Per the applicant's narrative, the use will applicable regulations and guidelines, including those related to noise, air quality, and waste disposal. Past operations at other locations demonstrate a track record of compliance and respect for the community. Therefore, we are confident their proposed use of Suite 354 at the Columbia Gorge Outlets will not cause any negative impacts on the community or the surrounding properties. As such, this criterion is met. F. This proposal satisfies the application provisions of this code. As such, this criterion is met. Staff recommends approval with conditions as outlined in the findings of fact. They are almost verbatim, the conditions of approval for the previous one you just heard. The only difference being Gresham Fire and Emergency Services number 1. A permanent address will be required on the building. A suite number must be indicated on the main entrance and a secondary access for identification. That's it.
Okay, questions for staff? I have one on your parking statistics. Did you take into account, I'm guessing that you took in 257th Way being built out completely?
No, just how it is existing right now.
Okay. Wouldn't we have configured that to take in the build out?
Like the design of the road or
Yeah.
in relation to the suite?
No, just the road.
Okay, well, for our purposes, all that's happening is a tenant's moving in to an existing suite.
Right.
So all existing facilities, no changes are being made, right? So,
No, I'm just saying, but if we were calculating potential.
oh, yeah.
But that's in the,
Suppose
that's in the future. So we have to look at what the parking is now and how the parking is accommodated through the tenant moving into the suite. So in the future, if 257th is widened and some parking is taken out and a new tenant is moving in, then we would take a look at what parking was potentially removed.
Yeah.
And if they're meeting parking
So I
standards.
guess my question would be, we're including right-of-way parking?
Mhm.
Okay,
Now.
for this purpose?
Correct.
Okay,
But right now, there's 169 extra spots, you said.
right.
So even if they lose all those spots in front of Starbucks, and
Oh, yeah.
we'll still have more than.
Yeah, we'll have enough. I was just curious if we
Right.
calculated that into the
Per
configuration.
CFEC, there are no minimum requirements for parking for this site.
Commissioner Wilcox?
Yes, I'm not sure if this text is part of the official record, but under finding of facts B, second paragraph, 257th is misprinted as 247th in a couple of places.
Mhm.
You're not getting anything by Paul.
No, I'll try and try. I can fix that, Paul.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, yeah. Section B.
Yeah.
Finding of facts.
All right. Any other questions for staff?
That was well done. Both of them.
All right, with that, and before I do this, I'd just like to remind everyone that the hearing procedure we went through earlier remains the same, and when we asked about conflict of interest, ex parte communication, that was for both applications. Okay. All right, with that, I would like to invite the applicant to come forward, please.
Hello.
Good evening. If you could state your name and address, that'd be great.
Okay, my name is Antonio Crivellari Jr., 450 Northwest 257th Way, Troutdale.
Okay. All right. Anything we should know?
About me?
No.
Well, really, as a short resume, I'm from Brazil. We moved up for Oregon like 3 years ago, and I've been doing jiu-jitsu for all my life. I'm a few times a world champion, national champion, Pan Am champion, and I don't know why Oregon, but God sent me here, and little by little I built my community, and now I like God's plan, and this place show up for us the end of the last year, and we've been dealing with this place, and finally we got this place. We are here to try to improve our community, and like it's jiu-jitsu changing my life, and I can help the community change as well.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Allen?
I did martial arts for 7 years, and I felt like it was instrumental in building the good side of my character.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. I cannot see myself without martial art. I started like in Brazil to survive, like like Brazil, how it is. You need to know something, like and those days become crazy as well. So it's important, as and don't need to use it. Like I think so. I start to fight in the streets, and I'm end up like practicing martial arts, become a martial artist, and run away from the fights. Like just how you behave. So once you being prepared, I think you get less on the problems, right? Like so I build a lot of who I am and what I am now because of the martial arts. I'm glad to have my life as well.
Anything, Commissioner Wilcox?
No, nothing from me.
No? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. Anyone wishing to testify as a proponent to the application? Anyone wishing to testify as an opponent to the application? Any neutral parties wish? Proponent? Yeah. Okay, great. Come forward, sir. State your name and address, please.
My name is Dwayne Denson. I live at 1021 Southwest 24th Street, Troutdale, Oregon.
Okay.
And I've been a member of Juniors Academy, and it's helped me. I'm 63 years old and just started it a couple years ago, and it's really helped my life. And I see what it does to some of his very young students and how it teaches them a lot of really good lessons. So I just hope you approve of it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Kevin Minkoff, where is the academy currently?
Before we were located on Snap Fitness in Gresham. I don't know the address.
Snap goodness,
Need to come forward. Okay, yeah.
Can't hear you.
So I don't know, I'm really bad on the names and address. Okay, I'm really bad on that. So we are located on Snap Fitness in Gresham for 2 years before then we decided to move up here.
All right. Thank you.
And you're not there currently?
Not anymore. We are waiting for,
The new location.
yes, we are waiting like all set to start. So we are just waiting for the license and let's work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we brought the applicant back up to answer a follow-up question from the commission. Okay, and with that, any opponents wishing to testify this evening? Any neutral parties to the application wishing to testify? Okay. Commissioner Allen.
I should wait till you finish the public part.
Okay. I'm ready to finish the public part.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Prickett, second by Commissioner Allen, to close the public hearing. All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed. Okay, you,
I don't know if this would be considered conflict of interest. I think not. When I was a city councilor, the city was involved in the court battle with you. But my same statement before stands. I'm a strong moral character that I treat everybody fairly.
A lawsuit with what owner?
Yeah. Owner of the outlet.
Out.
Oh, okay.
time equities. Okay. Any challenge from the commission? Okay. All right, thank you. Pardon me?
I've got a comment.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to state that my statement from earlier is true here. I think with online world, retail's under pressure. I think we need to consider these type of applications as being positive for the city because it brings use and activity that adds vibrance to the town.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Okay.
I'll just say I've been, since moving across town since 2020, this is Zach. I was looking for like a boxing gym and things of that sort over on this side and found us to be severely lacking in that, I feel like. So I think this could be good, teaching, again, everyone from small children to keeping elderly folks active. I mean, whatever in between, I think it's always a good move to have that kind of business model. So
We need to keep those elderly folks off the streets.
hey, they get into all kinds of trouble. I mean,
Anyone else? Okay. We're ready for conditions of approval then. Conditions first. So we'll do final order, I believe. Yep. Conditions and then finding facts and final order. You again?
Me again.
All right. Commissioner Prickett.
Why am I losing my mind here? I want to approve the conditions of approval for LU 007-2024 checkback Portland as written.
Okay.
this is Zach. I'd actually like to amend that to state as amended, given the change for 257th. Yeah, within the text.
That was in the findings.
That would be in the findings.
Apologies.
That's okay.
This isn't
Totally
amended.
So you want to
So I want
second
to
it
second that.
as it is?
Yes.
Okay.
Zach, I second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Prickett, second by Commissioner Andrews for case file LU 0007-2024, Checkmat Portland, conditions of approval as presented. Any discussion on the motion? All right, could we call the roll, please, Ms. Washington?
Commissioner Andrews,
Yes.
Commissioner Minkoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Leamy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Prickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilcox,
Yes.
Chair Stephenson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Allen.
Oh, yes.
Okay, that one passes. Next one up.
Chair Stephenson.
Yes, Commissioner
I
Prickett.
move that we approve the findings of fact and final order as amended by staff.
Okay.
This is Zach, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Prickett, second by Commissioner Andrews to approve finding of fact and final order for case file LU 0007-2024, Checkmat Portland, with paragraph B of the findings as amended. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Ms. Washington.
Commissioner Andrews,
Yes.
Commissioner Minkoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Leamy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Prickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilcox,
Yes.
Chair Stephenson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Allen.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck. Good luck.
You too.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's a little off the scene.
I don't even know how to come back after that.
No need.
Bold move.
All right. Are you up for this?
If you'd like, the only comments I have received were from Commissioner Wilcox. I received a couple questions and comments, but they're more based on the definitions. So that's stuff that we can go through, but I'm not sure if you're all ready to discuss uses. We can dive into that
I
right
don't
now.
normally do this. You guys ready, or do you need more time?
I'm ready.
Get your homework done. Okay, you did? All right.
I know you want to go there.
I didn't say that. I just.
Read between the lines.
I mean, we had DLCD and then, you know.
Right. Yeah, I need more time.
You do? Do you? Okay.
Okay.
It's important not to read 20 times.
All right, then we'll move this to 2 weeks. Okay. That work?
Yep, special hearing, is that what you're saying? Move it 2 weeks? or
A
you
special
want-
meeting, or the next meeting is April 10th. And on that agenda right now, tentatively, we have one hearing, and then a conversation about CSAC, but we could always move that because we can.
We could do it April 10th,
Year.
wouldn't you say? We can do it all April 10th.
Yeah.
Push CFAC if we need to.
Yep.
Okay, to
Yeah, we won't have
2028 or
that.
something.
DL,
Pardon me?
we won't have that parking issue on that agenda. It took up so much time on the first of the.
No, but then we get to talk about it, so that'll be worse, okay?
Put it at the end.
All right.
I like
so-
the way you think, Shirley.
Yeah. But then
Well, we'll do our homework on that issue as well.
Okay, I guess we are down to staff communications.
I only have one comment for the commission tonight. I believe our city recorder had emailed you the SEI statement.
Yep.
That's the statement of economic interest that's required by the Oregon Ethics Commission. That is due by April 15th.
But cannot be started until March 15th.
But-
Right.
Right.
Or
Correct.
after March.
After
15th.
March 15th,
After
which is
Friday.
quickly approaching here in the next couple days. So I just wanted to remind everyone.
Okay.
And the only thing is, which Director Palmer had just mentioned, that next meeting we will have one hearing, and that will be, it hasn't been sent out yet, but it will be it will be done and ready to go for the next docket. We actually have two. Main Street's on Halsey.
Yes.
Also, so we have two hearings at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is, so we'll have two hearings. So we'll have Main Street's on Halsey, which is code amendment. As we've discussed many times in here, we're kind of all aware where that's going. Nothing has changed on our end. We're just moving forward in order to finalize the grant. And then the other is for a variance, and that will be also coming for that next meeting. So those will both be us, and we'll get those to you with another lengthy packet. Okay.
All right. You're first. Anything?
I just wanted to thank staff for putting these together and doing a terrific job as always. Really appreciate you guys' efforts. And yeah, that's all I got.
Nothing.
It's nice to see staff getting to healthier levels, and you're all doing great. And I certainly hope that we haven't scared you off yet. It's good to see you show up again.
Well, we scared one.
Yeah, a little French exit.
Commissioner Wilcox, anything?
Yeah, I got a couple things. The question I had about the parking for the first hearing related to how much parking is required according to square footage. I'm just wondering if there's any standards or guidance in addition to the square footage based on usage, for example. What I'm thinking is, I think that was that particular building, and Danny can correct me if I'm wrong, but if that was built as a grocery store originally, I'd expect a grocery store to require a whole lot more parking than a 12-court pickleball court, for example. So if your only standard is square footage, there's going to be a huge variation in parking demand. And my other item is, I was told by Dakota, we don't actually have a definition for gym in the code. So you were using active recreation for both of the applicants tonight, whereas move was classified something else. So I didn't understand that. It seems like there should be. I also question whether those should be conditional or not, because if you look at what's allowed outright in both commercial and general, or community and commercial, community and general, I guess, are the two commercial classifications. You know, you can have a 50, 60,000 foot grocery store approved outright, but then this pickleball court, you know, requires conditional. It doesn't make sense to me.
I can respond if you'd like. Yes, I spoke with Commissioner Wilcox regarding move. He had a question for me. And from the research that I found, and also speaking with former planners, is they looked at it as a personal service. That's why it did not go through a conditional use. Gyms, because they offer training and more hands-on. There was, through discussion with myself and Assistant Planner Nick, that you know, for example, the check mat, that we could, you know, argue that it could be a personal service because he's teaching classes, and you know, it's hands-on. But until we figured like this, they both came in around the same time. So this was a discussion why I think the discussion over definitions was important to get a gym definition in there. And we opted, the best fit would be to go with the recreation active. Because I had the same question initially when the building permit came in for the pickleball facility. I had the same question. It's like, okay, why did they not have to go through anything besides site development review? And I was wondering, trying to look through, is how that determination came to be. And so I mean, I agree that it seems a little over the top a little bit to go through a conditional use for something. That's a minimum, that's smaller than what was there previous. But we just thought that was the best way. We're trying to do things the right way. And bring things to your attention that need to be. And I think through this process is where we found we needed to look at changing definitions or adding, because since we don't have one and gyms are so readily available throughout the city, and having a gym be labeled as one thing and a pickleball court, which could be a gym, as another, I think that's why we really looked at putting it under active use for pickleball court, because they specifically called it sports courts. And that is specifically under the definition of recreation active, where we could have gone either way with the check mat, but through our discussion, we opted to follow the same suit. And it's an active use. We're going to do that until we can get a definition and have that be either included, have gym be included in a use, or it's a standalone use. That's a discussion that we'll be continuing to have before we move forward with an amendment.
And I take it we work with the client and figure out where the best fit and all that, right?
Yes and no. So yes, in order to get more information from them to see, without trying to guide them into saying that there's something that they're not. Okay. Because that's something that we don't want to then approve something without going through the proper channels of, say, a conditional use, bringing it to the commission, and then have something be approved and have a lot of questions made from the public or from the commission itself of why we didn't bring it to you. So we tried to get information, and we went through a lot of discussions. This is previous to Erica being here, really trying to figure out and nail it down as to why we both agree that these should go through an active use. And the pickleball was a little bit easier, considering that they specifically called out sports court. If they didn't, it would probably be a little bit of a tougher discussion. And that's why it was a little bit more of a tougher discussion with checkmat, but we decided that ultimately let's follow the same path, have a sense of consistency, and move through until we can either make a change, or maybe we don't make a change and we have a definition for gym, but we still want to follow within the conditional use.
And that area, I think they have another buildable lot there, in which case the parking's probably fine.
There's two.
They have a pad.
Two pads.
Okay.
Yeah. And when it was designed, that's why they're over parking. It was designed for a use that would still fit within the parking that's already there.
Right.
But I agree with you that it was kind of an iffy one with the sports mat, but it's considered a sport.
That's where we went.
And because Eve said he competed in it, so to me that means it's a sport. If it was something recreational or like a gym where you go in and you're not competing, that
more
may be
one-on-one personal.
Yeah.
And that's where they got that determination, is because they offer group classes similar to checkmat, but they also offer one-on-one training.
Right.
And that's more of a personal service, more hands-on, one-on-one, rather than group class the whole time.
Right.
So that's where they got that determination from move. In my personal opinion, I probably would have made move go through a conditional use, but that's just my personal opinion.
As big as it is.
I'm thinking you're right when you say it deserves its own definition, because the overlap can be somewhat unclear.
And this is that gray area, like that Commissioner Allen had mentioned, is we don't want to give them too much, to be like, hey, you should really kind of go this way, and you don't have to go through this process, because we want to do the process the right way. Our goal is to help everybody come in and get to a yes decision. And while this was a bit of a longer process for the applicants, it was the best way to move forward, to make sure that we're checking all the boxes on our end, but also being completely transparent with the public. And that instead of going through just saying it's permitted, no one will be notified. We have a lot of people in support, so now that kind of brings awareness to them as well. So I think it was the proper avenue to go through without putting.
We could even include a definition that talks about when there is a situation of overlap. In tax law, there's a lot of discussion of preponderance of evidence, a 51%. So if something were 51% or more something, and 49% or less something else, it might then, and that can be a definition itself in the code. So again, we can pinpoint
And I sent everybody the spreadsheet, so remember to make any comments, edits on that. That's a good, you can add that in there as well, and then send it back to me, and I'll, put everything together. We can discuss it again at the next meeting.
And I was gonna say, sometimes the conditional use is triggered not because it's, less intensive, because it's a substantial change in use from what was approved initially.
So I had a question. You answered one of them was how MOVE got in, what they came in under. But then secondly with MOVE, why did these two come before us, but MOVE didn't come before us? What was the
That's
difference?
Because
that's the main question.
Personal services is a permitted use outright within both commercial zones. Active use, active recreation is conditional. So that's why these both came where MOVE didn't. And then I'm sorry, Commissioner Wilcox, I forgot your first question. Would you mind restating that for me?
I think I've forgotten it too. But I was gonna throw out a couple other names or activities. How would you classify a yoga or Pilates studio, for example? And also, I'm still kind of hung up on the requiring the conditional for, some of these that, seem awfully minor compared to when you could put in a grocery store or a hardware store as a type 2, whereas a jujitsu studio is a type 3. It seems, really unnecessarily bureaucratic.
No, and we can look at those, but sometimes, again, it's the different use, different type of thing that you're doing there that triggers it.
I think also it's more, the question about a Pilates or yoga, that's a really good question. That was something I would have to sit down and have a long talk and kind of go, kind of like what Nick and I had done previously, is really kind of weigh the facts on that, because you're right, that does fall right within this. And I agree that it does kind of seem a little bit over the top compared to, say, like a grocery store. But if you think commercial, a grocery store falls more into commercial than, say, and like a larger gym may fall more into commercial than, say, something smaller like a yoga studio or a jiu-jitsu studio. But it all depends on how we come up with that kind of gym. I would consider yoga studio, honestly, I would look at that almost more of a studio. It's not as active. I mean, it's active, but it's not as active as, say, jiu-jitsu or gym. So that's just off the top of my head. Again, I would have to discuss this with the rest of our staff and really kind of dive into it. But I think that's something that we could look at as we're going through this definition space and continue kind of feeling. But yes, as Chair Savinson mentioned, a change of use in itself, depending on if it's a permitted outright or not, that we could have technically, say a grocery store wants to come back in to this to the pickleball facility. It is also up to the director to determine if we want to elevate that to a type 3. So we also have the power within. It's like, hey, this is actually permitted outright, but we can technically elevate it to a type 3 because we believe there might be certain conditions that we would like others or the commission to listen to.
And I would say, I won't say whether or not I think any of these should be conditional uses or not, but an example is you've got a retail supermarket and you've gone to a pickleball court. Those are substantially different. And one advantage you do get from this process is the community has an opportunity to weigh in on what's going into these spaces. And also, too, other tenants have an opportunity to weigh in because they're impacted as well.
If it's, say, we're a gym going to a pickleball court, it might have been a different discussion because the use is not that different.
Right.
So that would be, and they would already say they already had to go through a conditional use previously, then that'd be a different kind of discussion.
But Commissioner Wilcox, she also asked about parking. And I could be wrong. I just remember something like 5 per 1,000.
Oh, that's right. He had mentioned
something like that. But then the other thing that we had was trip generation. And that caused us to put in more parking as well because of the number of trips that we were gonna generate or hope to generate at that site. So those play into it. Anything else?
That's right, that was my first question about parking versus parking versus square footage.
For a personal services or minor entertainment facility within the commercial zone, it's 4.3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So, and that, I mean, that's different than, yeah, you're correct, it's different. It was initially built out for a grocery store, and that has, I believe that is
4.1.
4.1 per 1,000.
Was it 4.1 back then?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'd have to do, so that would be some archiving research.
Like in 18, whatever it was.
So when you guys moved out of the old store and moved into the new store, it was you, Pans, or somebody came into the old store, was parking would have stayed, 2 grocery stores would still been the same because of the square footage, not that.
It could have, but you wouldn't have, because you would do, obviously you do a lease restriction at that point.
I know, but I'm just talking.
You know, you wouldn't
Okay,
allow,
Home
but
Depot,
yeah,
let's say Home Depot went into that space,
yes,
then you would have.
that would.
Generate, you'd still have enough parking space because of square footage, not usage.
Right. Anything else, Commissioner Wilcox?
No, that's it for me, thanks.
No.
Yeah, I just have one comment. As a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee, we are having some very healthy discussions the last couple of months regarding our role in bringing more awareness to the public, to citizens. That's the whole point of the CAC. And as it particularly relates to land use and planning and so on. We're trying to figure out ways, we're coming up with a better definition for the CAC. And along with that, we want to know how can we do a better job of informing the public of meetings, public meetings like this, public hearings. Obviously, there are means of advertising it, but the discussion that we've been having over the last several months is that we're not getting the information out, and we could do a better job. So I am soliciting any of your, not right now, but at any time, soliciting your opinions about what we might do differently to aid our committee in getting the word out about public hearings and about land use, and so we can get more citizen involvement is what is mandatory from the state level, as well as what City Council wants as far as the CAC is concerned.
More citizen involvement is mandatory?
Yes. Yes, there's a CIC, there's the Citizen Involvement Committee that is at the state level, and we're going through state ordinances and regulations, as well as the city ordinance, talking about what is the role of the CAC. The CIC is now part of the, actually is the role of City Council, and whether that really should, maybe they should divest themselves of that role. Yeah, it's like I say, it's a very healthy discussion the last few months, and the idea is to be more public-minded, make more awareness to citizens to get more involvement in these kinds of discussions.
Which I would agree with 100%. And so are you aware, you probably are, that the state notice for a type 2 is 100 feet, and we're 250 feet in Troutdale? For type 3, it's 500 feet, or 250 feet, we're 500 feet. And same with a type 4. Additionally, we post notices on properties where there is a pending application, which are all above state standards.
Mhm.
And so,
But it's not just a matter of ticking the boxes. This is the discussion we're having, is what can we do to better inform, not just sticking a poster on a telephone pole somewhere. I'm just using that loosely as an example, but not just through the website, not just in the Troutdale newspaper, but what other means can we have for soliciting more citizen involvement?
so is CAC planning on coming back with like a recommendation to us?
Yes, I think so. I think that would be
Okay.
part of the discussion. What's that?
TBD.
To be determined. Well,
Okay.
so anyway, I'm just saying, my role here is kind of a bridge between that committee and this. So I'm bringing you to the awareness of what's happening in that committee.
Right.
As it relates to this committee, and if you have any ideas about how we can better coordinate that information getting out to citizens to try to get more citizen involvement, that would be a good thing.
Just have the mayor do some TikTok dances, I think it'd be good.
Well, there is discussion.
I like that.
We had the discussion about maybe a town hall once or twice a year about issues that are coming before the planning commission as a possibility.
But these
So
come
we
every
just
month.
think everybody needs to be made aware of what everybody else is talking about behind their backs. Because it's not, we're talking about you guys.
You're not talking
No,
about.
in a good way, in a good way. Erica's nodding her head, and so is Dakota, and,
It's in a very good way.
yeah.
I would say if for your committee, it's frustrating for us that we have less public involvement than we used to due to state mandates. And I think I can speak for us all in saying that.
Yeah.
Well, it's good for me to hear that. I didn't know that. That you're frustrated.
Yeah, it's been changed substantially, so there's less cases that come before this commission. Staff has less involvement in some of the cases that they see. It's all been kind of taken down a couple of notches.
Well, we need to address it. I mean, I don't know exactly, but that's part of the discussion.
That's state control, state planning, really going away from the local level.
Right.
It's so weird because that's not what the state is saying in terms of the CAC and the CIC. They're talking about getting more involvement. So there definitely some research that has to be done, investigating.
Yep, I mean, you know, the state has mandated these parking requirements that Troutdale is evaluating and making determinations on how the city wants to move forward. And so that's a state mandate when it comes to that. But how do we involve the citizens, you know, in that conversation as well?
Right. I guess where I would go with that is the zoning changes. Okay, it used to be that like if someone was gonna put up a fourplex next to you, you would know about that.
Now you don't.
Now you don't. That can be done.
If my house burnt down today, I could put a flagpole on my property and I wouldn't have to tell my neighbors. I
Middle
just have to
housing.
build it.
Yeah.
Which isn't fair to my neighbors, because they should have some kind of say in it. Because then the parking changes. So I understand. And you guys that have that don't pour the limit, you have to deal with all this because they're gonna come to you.
I think it's like the state mandating, we need more involvement, but they're also mandating these things that reduce that involvement. It's interesting.
The public is very reactionary, so when we do something, they won't know that we did it. But when there starts to become visible evidence of what we've done, then they just come out in droves. They're more reactionary than proactive. And what we want to try to do is get
Get
them
them
more
more
proactive.
proactive.
get them up
Sure, exactly.
earlier in the process.
Yeah.
And, you know, when people feel they've been heard, it just goes a long way. It really helps the process a lot. So I'm with you. I just have some other forces that are not.
Right, and
Jiving.
I'd like to know what those are. We can incorporate them into the discussion, figure out
Okay.
how
And we
how
can
do
talk
we use
offline
it.
too.
Okay, great.
All right. Okay, I brought up the signal at Stark and Evans.
Oh, that
Okay.
lovely signal.
There's still some issues with that there
They are
traffic device.
going to work on it this summer. What I
Well,
saw
that's
yesterday.
just great.
I turned it in twice. I talked to Travis Halton about it.
Mhm.
He said, go to this site, do it. Reported it, and within 2 minutes, I got an email back that the file had been like removed twice. And so Travis had a meeting with them on that Friday afterwards. They were gonna get right onto it because traffic signals are a high priority, right?
Maybe not.
No, they're not. There's something to do with when the power went out and it's on that timer and they won't be able to fix it until summer now. So
Oh,
that's what
oh,
I think
nice.
somebody said yesterday.
It's gonna impact pickleball.
So maybe buy stock in a brake shop or something. People be
Yeah,
stopping.
because Multnomah County took over all of the signals in Troutdale.
Yeah, Gresham doesn't do it anymore?
No, Gresham walks their own dog.
Gresham
Well, somebody
basically,
at one point.
they bought, and so they do all of the traffic in Troutdale.
Maybe they should live out here. Whoever designs or sets it.
Anyway, so
Have you noticed there's a lot more accidents on 257th and Stark?
Yeah,
When
it's,
they changed the light timing?
they,
Whole lot more.
yeah, and it's that yellow.
Yeah,
flashing.
there's flashing yellow on the.
People don't
blind
understand
turn.
what yellow flashing light means. And so,
With all due respect, I don't think they understand what a red light means.
no, well, either that, either.
Right?
Usually if you're looking for a yellow light, it's a caution light to say that oncoming traffic has a right of way.
Well, oncoming traffic is hidden by the left-hand turn lane, and so
Oh.
it's not seen till later.
Right,
And people who are not as confident or a little more loose in their driving, will tend to pull out in front of them.
yeah.
And it's accident after accident after accident.
They had a semi-accident up there just recently too.
Yeah.
While we're talking about that particular intersection, if you are traveling west on Stark and you come up to that corner, there's a right turn pocket onto Troutdale Road. And if someone was willing to put some, I don't know, gravel or
In the hole.
anything in
Oh,
that,
yeah.
Oh, right
the
by
crater?
the berry stand.
yeah, the crater that can sink a small automobile, more people would probably come off of there, because what you have now is the traffic backs up, the light's not long enough, so people are running the light and they've gotten hit.
Okay, Multnomah County said that is not a turn lane.
Well,
Oh.
it's there with an arrow on it.
I don't know. They don't.
Taking
fill-
notes and
Yeah.
I
It's not
will
a turn lane,
investigate.
it's not quite a decommissioned turn lane, it's just, it's got a crater.
That has been a thorn in people's side.
I think also the one at 257, a lot of people are running that light because the traffic is backed up so far, so when that light turns yellow, man, they just gun it. And 2 or 3 cars, it'll turn red and 2 or 3 cars will go through it.
And that's at 257th and Stark.
Dark, yeah,
Almost pick any intersection. you
just,
have that.
yeah,
That one particularly seems to have a lot of
Yeah,
accidents.
that
Well,
one's
yeah,
bad.
because
Proven by
people,
data.
yeah,
Yeah.
they run the light. I mean, I set, as soon as the light turns green, I set for a couple of seconds, because invariably somebody runs
It
the
didn't
light.
used to be that way, you
No.
used to have so many accidents.
So speaking of 257th, the council has taken a position on the improvements that the county wants to make to that road, and they're asking the state to reevaluate it.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that goes, but this is something that the Public Safety Committee was working on. And there's some questions with some things that they want to do.
Well, it's not gonna be as safe.
Well,
You
yeah,
narrow it and add bicycle lanes down there.
well, and you're
That's
gonna
more trouble.
make one lane smaller,
Right, and so,
and it's a school zone.
so
Well,
we're,
it is kind of like the light, they made a change, we've
Uh-huh.
had lots of accidents, nobody seems
Yeah.
to be reviewing it or undoing their change.
No,
so we're gonna just see how that plays out. But I do think that the community's really been active in this change.
Oh, gosh,
Um,
I've heard an earful.
No, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think, they're saying, hey, we're concerned about this, and hopefully the county's listening. And several of you are up for committee appointments, and you should have gotten your applications, and do not turn an application in late.
There's been problems with that in the past.
Yeah, so please turn your application in. Shut up.
Does anybody not have their application? Did anybody not receive an application?
I have an application for planning commission.
Yes, that's for those that are on the, that's what you would be receiving it for. If you haven't, then I can reach out and send it. If you haven't, I think.
3.
There's 3.
There's 3 commissioners that are up. Mhm.
So if you haven't received it, let me know. But if you have, make sure you turn it.
And then something was brought to my attention from the meeting of February 14th. Okay, when we were having our discussion, and this is what happens when you get old and senile,
oh, wait.
but we were talking about the Eagle Ridge development. And I mentioned something about that Eagle Ridge added like 46 parking spots or something of that nature. And I've got to tell you, I completely misspoke, because Eagle Ridge added 8 extra ones. They were slated for 504 and they went to 512. And I think the point that I was trying to make, and I did not make it very well, was that they added more parking than what they were required to. Just so you're aware of it, I mean, if this would have been variance down, it could have gone from 504 spots down to 353. By today's standards, it'd probably be like 9. But, so I misspoke on that, and I apologize for that. And it was also brought to my attention that when I mentioned Home Forward, their application, that they said they were going to come in after the first of the year. And what they stated was, that they would come in after January 1st using all of the state provisions that would go into effect on January 1st, right? And one of the provisions was the no parking for publicly supported housing. And I don't know if anyone else did, but at that time, when that was said, I felt that that was them saying, if you don't approve the development, we will come back after January 1st when we don't have to provide any parking and put it through. And what I want to clarify is, I don't know that they ever said they would come in with no parking, but I do believe sincerely that they implied it. And actually during that meeting, I actually called a recess and I asked them myself to just understand that that's what they were talking about, and that was what I was told.
I got the message.
And so you were specifically told that they'll come in with no parking?
They said they could come in with no parking.
Well, that was my understanding at that
Right.
meeting as well, that
Yeah.
they would come in. We understood that the new code was gonna have
Do this,
But I
or it's gonna
understand
be
that you're
worse.
making the phrasing.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
I understand that you're clarifying the phrasing that.
Yeah.
Right,
It was implied and wasn't actually stated on the record.
right.
Yeah,
It was
that's all.
implied.
I'm just trying to
Yep.
clear that up.
Cleaning the streets.
Okay. All right.
You're good.
I don't know about that. I want to thank everybody for all their work. Thank you guys for putting staff, great job. Once we got going, we were all good, okay?
We got it.
Yeah.
Now we know. for the next
Now,
Those
yeah, now we know what to do.
Those things happen. I think everybody goes through it once. You've gone through it twice now, haven't you?
I was informed after the CAC meeting that the audio was hard to hear, but I haven't had an issue of absolutely no audio when the meeting's been running yet, so that was a first.
Yeah, and that's always an uncomfortable spot.
It is.
Either starting or already started.
We already started, and when
Yeah.
I spoke with our IT, he said, "Have you started yet?" I told him yes, and he just goes, "Oh no."
Yeah.
So,
And he's so quiet. Yeah.
You got perseverance,
It always
because a lot of
happens to
people
me.
just go.
Yeah.
Yeah, poor Miss Washington, she's been through it a few
He
times.
did say it's been
Wasn't
a
working.
ongoing issue that they're
Yeah.
just trying to figure out what the actual issue is, and he doesn't actually know. Something's not, well, for some reason, the sound system isn't necessarily talking with the computer
Yeah,
unless you
it's
reboot
like
it.
sync up.
Yeah,
They'll get it. You know, 10 years ago, we would have said you couldn't even do this stuff.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
just
so
want to
it's
say, a lot of
like-
people in this situation, they just throw their hands up and they give up. And I appreciate you all sticking with it.
of course.
You know, making it happen.
Thanks
Were
for
you,
Nick for
we were wondering,
calling.
were you feeling pressured at that time?
A little bit, because I feel
Yeah,
bad that
okay.
we started and I have to cancel, I have to end the meeting, and then I was a little worried what happens if the meeting's not there when I re-upload it, like reboot it, then I have to figure that. So there was a little bit, but luckily Nick was able to get Jeremy on the phone for us, so.
Nice.
And I see Counselor Glanz.
Where'd you go?
Where'd she
Oh,
go?
there
There
she
she is. Did we miss anything tonight? How are you?
I was gonna say, you know how to get me fired up there at the start, so it's a good thing that my camera and mic are off.
What'd we fire you up about?
Oh, the whole parking stuff. That's just,
I
All
know,
these years, we've learned nothing.
yeah.
Yeah.
With that note, I would take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Gotta come back
Aye.
tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah.
As you get older,
Me
you
too.
see the same mistakes happening over and over throughout history,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's like,